accept who they are. Don't try to force them to be something that they're not, because it won't work and they won't be happy.
You're listening to the That Dog podcast, the show that brings you life lessons from dogs, shared by the people who love them most. I'm your host, Harriet Alexander, here to discover another That Dog story. I'm super excited about this episode as I get to chat to a very good friend of mine about a very special dog. Winkie Spiers has been working with dogs and their humans for nearly 20 years and is a sought-after behaviour consultant and speaker. She lives in London with her 3 gorgeous dogs, Maisie, Pete and Artie. One thing people don't always know about Winkie is that she is incredibly generous with her time and skills and mentors many other trainers, myself included, all around the world. Winkie, welcome to the That Dog podcast and thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Before we introduce your That Dog, I thought it might be useful for people who don't know you as well to get a sense of what the core philosophy of your work is. What's the thing that when owners come to see you, you really try and instill?
I think my core philosophy is for dogs and their human family to live their best lives and understand each other as well as possible. And to enable that, I look at only teaching what I call life skills, things which are really important to know that might save a life, and just for people to understand what the dogs actually need in their day-to-day life. Too often, the emphasis is just on training, sit, lie down, roll over, give a paw are the most popular things that people teach. And none of those are useful. And I don't think the dogs even like doing it. So if we teach things to the dog that they like doing, I think they like us more. And so really it's about having a good and understanding relationship with each other. I'm often teaching people to do less, and calling myself a dog trainer is a little bit of a misnomer because really I'm teaching people, and a lot of my clients realize it's them that needs to learn, not the dog. So when we learn how to care for dogs, we don't really need to do much in terms of training. There are some instances and some breeds and some personalities of dogs who definitely like to do more, but I think it's got to be very individual, and it's looking at each dog and each client and family as the individuals that they are and finding out what they need to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine over the, 2 decades that you've been doing this, you must have met a lot of individuals and got to know some of those kind of needs and differences.
Yeah, it's interesting because now I've been doing it for so long, I'm seeing the kids who are now grown up and having families of their own with their puppies.
Yeah.
I saw them when they were children and now I see them as adults, and I'm seeing a progression, and it's so lovely. And things have changed. And I see clients who have gone through several dogs and they've got old and then they've got another one. And they come back again and again to do the puppy classes and things because, of course, nothing stays the same. The way I'm training now is very different to 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Everything changes and we're all evolving and constantly changing. And that is important. We must always be progressive and keep learning more.
Talking about progression, we're almost going right back, I believe, to the beginning with your That Dog story. We're here to get to know your That Dog. Who were they and how did you meet?
Well, I had been without a dog for 7 years. I'd had a terrier before. And when he died, I was devastated, and my life didn't really fit with having another dog. Then I started to think, actually, it was about time. I wanted another dog. I wanted a terrier. And I started looking on the internet at work. And while I was trawling through the internet, I saw Rescue, which was only about 2 hours away. And they had a picture of my perfect dog. If I'd drawn a picture of the terrier that I wanted, this was him. And there he was, sitting in the back of a wire cage, and I was obsessed. And I walked in to speak to my boss and I said, do you know what? I've just seen my perfect dog. I've got to go. I'm taking the rest of the day off. And off I went. And that was how I met him. And it was love at first sight, which I'm not saying is a really good thing, but I got there. It wasn't a particularly lovely looking rescue. It was a lot of outside metal cages with a mobile home, which was the office. And I went and banged on the door and said I'd come to see Terry the terrier. And they said, oh, we don't open till 2. We're closed for lunch. So they said, you can take him for a walk. So they put him on an extender lead on his collar, and they said, come back at 2:00 with him and we'll talk to you then. So off we went and we had a walk, and he kept pulling on lead and looking onto the horizon. I thought he was deaf. He never looked at me once. We just went and had to explore around the area. And I just loved him. I absolutely loved him. He didn't even look at me, but it was like he was who I wanted. I went back to the caravan, and the 2 men in there said, well, do you want him or not? He's 70 pounds. And I was like, well, don't you need to do a home trick or anything? I was anticipating it taking longer. And they said, no, we need 70 pounds only in cash. I had to leave him with them in the caravan and go and get some cash out. And it was the first time he looked at me as I walked out of the van. He absolutely looked at me as like, you can't leave me here. And I went off to the town as quickly as possible, got my 70 pounds, and I rushed back thinking, what if somebody else has adopted him in the meantime? And there was nobody else there. It was like, I wanted him so much. And then I went back, gave him the 70 pounds and put him in my car, and off we went. And on the way home, I said, I don't know who you are, but you're not Terry the terrier. So I was trying out names for him. And when I said Dennis, his ears pricked up. And I was happy to call him Dennis. One of my favourite authors, his name was Dennis. So that was worked out very nicely.
Were you working with dogs professionally at that time?
I wasn't. I was working for a private Swiss bank on the stockbroking side as a logistics manager. So I was totally unprepared. Mm-hmm. I acted on instinct, and I took him home. And when we got home, I let him off the lead in my home. I have a nice big garden, and he just ran into the garden and started licking bricks. So there was a raised area built of bricks, and he started licking the bricks, making a weird noise, and I didn't know what to do. I just left him to it. He was salivating all over the bricks, and I thought, oh my God, this is a bit odd. He'd also had quite raw front legs. In his cage, he'd obviously been licking his front legs. I just left out food and water and let him do whatever he wanted. And at bedtime, he was still in the garden, just lying and licking the bricks. But when I woke up in the morning, he was asleep under my bed. I'd left the doors and things open. So he did come in the night at some point. But yes, it wasn't the ideal way to start.
What were those early weeks like, those early months with Dennis?
Oh, God, they were crazy. I took a bit of time off work. And because he was so crazy on lead, he was always looking in completely the opposite direction. And he would get very excited about other dogs or very cross with them. He was a bit unpredictable. I did speak to a couple of local dog trainers, because although I grew up with quite a lot of dogs and I'd had my own dog before, I did, have some idea, obviously, of what to do with dogs. But he was just completely crazy. And one trainer said to do some obedience to make him listen, to get him to sit and lie down and things. And I thought, well, he's not really listening, and I don't really want to do that. And then another one suggested I try to wear him out, to throw balls and to go for long walks. And neither of those things sounded right. I did find a dog training class, and the lady who owned the dog training business had actually done a weekend course with Turid on calming signals. And although she was fairly traditional in her approach, she'd made some changes, which was great. So I found out about Turid, and this led me to find Sheila Harper's courses up in Staffordshire. I signed up to her 2-year international dog trainer education. And at the time, Turid was coming to the UK a lot. So I did everything that Turid did. Ali Rowbottom and Sandra Lockwood did a weekend course on rescue dogs, which was, oh my God, it was like a light bulb going on. I completely understood a lot more about what was going on. And I started learning, but I made terrible mistakes. I let him off lead one day in the middle of nowhere, and he ran off for 4.5 hours.
Oh, God. Terrifying.
And I had no idea if I was going to see him again. So I didn't know what to do. So I just sat on a wall and stayed where I was, and eventually came trotting down the track with his tail wagging. And I was like, oh my God, I thought we'd lost each other. And he was really happy to see me. It was the beginning, trust and building a relationship.
I think one thing I'd like to circle back to is this feeling you had that things being suggested to you felt a bit wrong. I think sometimes with owners, they have that feeling, and I don't know if you would suggest that that's a good thing to listen to potentially.
I often tell people, listen to your gut. Our gut instinct is there for a reason. And I think too often we doubt ourselves. People sometimes think everyone else knows better. Have confidence in your gut feeling, especially if it's a good one. I learned immediately with him from a very early stage, less is more. Somebody said about flyball, and I went to this field and I could hear the barking before I could even see where I was going. I mean, you could just hear all this furore going on. And I got there, and they were very excited to have somebody new to come and join them. Somebody was telling me that they'd had to cage the entire inside of their car. And even then the dog had managed to eat any of the soft stuff inside the car. Wow. And these dogs were crazed. And we had a little go, and he went over the jumps and hit the thing and got the ball and ran back. And he absolutely was very excited about it. And then he'd go and get the ball and then run off. And do you know what I thought about it? I said, yeah, it's been very nice. Thank you very much. But we're going to go now because I didn't want to end up with a dog who's barking and destroying the inside of my car. And it was interesting to go and see it. And it led me with the lasting impression that these high adrenaline things were definitely not for him. But I thought it might be interesting to go and see because somebody had recommended it. But we were there probably for about 20 minutes, and they said that he had the potential to be very good. I couldn't bear it. The people were screaming and shouting. The dogs were barking. It was incredibly stressful. But I'm really glad I went and did it because it means I know why I don't like it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about those behaviours that were tricky with Dennis early on. What were the most difficult things, or the things that you really felt, look, this needs to be supported in some way or worked on?
It was his obsessive behaviours. Right from the beginning, when I picked him up, he'd already licked his front legs raw before I even got him. And then when I brought him home, and he was licking bricks in the garden, and what he did was he licked plaster from in between the bricks, and he'd pull one out of the wall and he'd lie on it, salivating, just lick it, making this awful sound. And it was a form of self-soothing. And if the weather was bad and the back door was closed, he would lick the walls. I got him some big marrow bones and I fed him different things to see what he liked. I did try him going to a local dog walker, and she had dogs in her home, took them for walks, and then they were in their home. And I thought it would be a good idea, and I could drop him off there on my way to work and pick him up on my way back. But always on the way home, he had dysentery. I realised that actually that was excitement. The day was not suiting him. In the morning when I walked him there, his digestive system was fine. He had a phenomenal prey drive. He would chase anything, birds, squirrels, literally anything. And listening, the recall, he was so stressed all the time, he couldn't hear. And I did take him to the vet for a vet check. And they said that his ears were fine. He just couldn't hear. I think he had inner voices and everything. She was too busy. So I made mistakes with him because I didn't know any better, but I had to change what happened with him in his day-to-day life. Also, if he was challenged, if you tried to get him away from a brick or try to interrupt him with some of those things, he didn't like it. You didn't get much warning before he might try to nip you. I was respectful of it, but I had a friend who came over with her partner, and he thought that Dennis shouldn't be doing these things and went to try and stop him, and Dennis bit him. And I did tell him, just leave him, it doesn't matter. And he had to insist. There wasn't any blood, I think it was bruised. And I just said, well, I told you not to do. He didn't come to my home again.
Maybe for the best.
That was one of many times you'd say to people, please leave him alone, don't touch him. And they do it anyway. Oh, but I love dogs, or I know about dogs. It's like, that wasn't what I asked you. He does not like some people, especially if they try and challenge him. If they wave their hands around him or try to force him to do something, his eyes would go quite hard, and it's like, no, I don't think so.
And it highlights that important role that we have to be an advocate for our dog and to know those things and try. Yeah. It doesn't always work, but to try really hard to convey that information. So you talked about some of the changes you started to make. I'd love to delve into those aha moments and for you to outline for people who aren't familiar with Turit or Sheila what that philosophy was, why it grabbed you, and how it started to help.
It really grabbed me because it was about understanding the dog. And Sheila had obviously learned from Turit, and Turit was still coming over and teaching for Sheila as well. Understanding body language and stress, for me, were the biggest eye-openers ever. Of course, they communicate through body language. They're not barking at each other all the time. They are using the subtle body language. All animals do. And having had horses and dogs before, it was suddenly, oh my God, I could have understood animals so much better had I known those things before. and looking for signs of stress when the adrenaline is going through the roof. And of course, they can't hear you and they're in their fight or flight response. But understanding the body language of dogs and the stress and also health are pretty vital. But also during that time, the dog training class that I'd started with him, the dog training school, asked me if I would like to take some of the classes, and I could take Dennis and do the classes for free, which I really loved doing. And with me knowing nothing, she suggested I take over and doing the puppies. Luckily, I was learning stuff at the time. I was able to see a lot more dogs while I was doing Sheila's courses and Turid's weekends and summer camps. So I had a lot of access to other dogs, which really helped me learn a lot because I could just see what was going on.
And you mentioned health. And I think that's a really important thing that people don't always consider. How did health play into Dennis's story?
I thought that he was deaf wrongly, and that was just stress. Licking his legs, the traditional approach would be to put a cone on him and bandage his legs, removing his only way to self-soothe. If you're taking away a coping strategy, then that is going to have health implications. With his diarrhea, often we think diarrhea is something we need to go and see the vet about. Sometimes it's just to do with stress, because in your fight or flight, your body just wants to avoid whatever's in your system. Those are all symptoms of something being out of balance. And we go to the vet and then we get drugs to suppress the symptoms, and then that can become even more of a health issue. So sometimes we end up with dogs in a whole cycle of stuff where they're on a hyperallergenic diet because they get diarrhea and they're licking their legs and they think it's allergy related. So very often I think we don't delve enough into lifestyle and disease and seeing, is it lifestyle, is it disease, is it a mix of both, and using diagnostic tools to actually see what's relevant. Because one dog with diarrhea and itching, it might be food intolerances or allergies, but another one, it may very well be stress, but it looks exactly the same. But if you have to keep going to the vet and you're on medication, then that's going to be increasing the stress, which can be the cause in the first place.
Yeah, it's so interconnected, isn't it? I mean, it's the same with people. The effect of stress on the body is huge. Yeah. It
really is interconnected. Dennis, he didn't really mind going to the vet, but if they wanted to take him to go do something and I wasn't there, he would be a problem. He did get a little bit grumpy about being handled because they handle in quite a perfunctory way sometimes. Of course, they do need vet care. Good vet care is absolutely vital, but it's also having an understanding and knowing your dog, really knowing your dog, and always being an advocate for your dog. I remember Karen Webb doing a talk years ago about being an advocate for your dog. And it's so true. We know our dogs better than anybody else. We must always trust that we know our dogs better than anybody else and be an advocate for them.
You started exploring all these different things, and then you were invited to start taking classes and the puppy classes. It sounds like a familiar story, actually, come to think of it. Full circle again. Was there a point where you thought, actually, I want to do this all the time? How did that transition happen?
I was working full-time in my job, and the lady who owned the dog training school became ill. She sadly was going to be in hospital for quite a long period of time. So I took over the dog training school and made some changes. We did traditional courses in a village hall. There was the puppy class, then there was the intermediate class, and then there was the advanced class. But I changed it to a certain extent where built into the cost of their classes was a harness and a longer lead. Everybody had to wear them because they got them free with their class. And they were good harnesses and good leads. And for 6 or 7 months, I ran it on my own and it was really successful. I stopped doing the Kennel Club Good Citizens scheme because I questioned whether or not some of the things that the dogs had to learn to do, whether they were relevant. So I stopped doing that. I became a member of the APDT and they came and observed me doing classes and one-on-ones. In those days, they would just turn up at your classes and assess you during your classes. So you never knew when they were coming. But I was assessed by a lovely senior member of the APDT and they assessed me as being okay for doing all the stuff I was doing, which was great. Then when the lady who had owned the school, when she felt better and she came back, I'd made quite a lot of changes. The classes were all going really well. And I said, I've learned a lot from you. Thank you so much. But I couldn't envisage working with her again because I definitely had my own points of view. So I started to do my own classes, and people were asking me to go and see them on a one-to-one basis. So this was all in addition to working full-time. And I just continued to do more courses to learn more from lots of different people. Somebody asked me the other day to write down all the courses and all the people I've listened to over the years, and it's phenomenal. I have done courses with so many really well-known great people who've also changed what they do. What they were doing then and what they're doing now has all completely changed. So I started up my own business, and because my job that I was in, I'd been doing for quite a long time, I was able to do assignments and study at work because I wasn't always that busy. I could do my job quite easily. Then one day I decided that I had enough confidence in what I was doing to make the transition to leave my job and start doing my dog dream full time. So I've been doing this full time now for coming up for 15 years, I think. And I was doing it part time in my job for 5 years. And it was great because I was earning quite good money in my job. So I was able to afford to do all the learning that I did. Having said that, I still do go and learn more all the time from different people. During that time, Dennis, he transformed. What a dog. We did so much together. He was my little best mate, came with me everywhere. He would come to work with me sometimes he wanted to, sometimes he didn't. And if I was going out to see friends or going out for dinner, he always came with me. So we did pretty much everything together, my little sidekick and I.
I resonate also with that part of your story where as you're learning, you're applying the learning that you're doing with Dennis and you're seeing that very real-time success, which I think can really speed along that process. And he was really a bit of a teacher, I suppose.
He was. If you got it wrong, he was quite determined about what he liked and what he didn't. But it was really good to do it because it was quite a hard-hitting course, and it made me appalled by some of the stuff that went on. Some of the training wasn't good. There were choke chains regularly used, and puppies have their nose put in their wheel poo and being smacked and put outside. It was that time was when Barbara Woodhouse was quite at her height and yanking on dogs' necks. There was some quite harsh stuff. I know on the course, I think it started with about 14 of us on the 2-year international dog trainer course. And at the end, there were only, I think, 3 or 4 of us that finished because a lot of people felt so bad about what they'd done in the past that they gave up. They just didn't want to get involved anymore because it's a massive shift. But luckily, I was already working with dogs and being able to practice what I was doing. And although I did have a lot of doubt sometimes, I looked around at what some of the other dog trainers were doing and thought, well, actually, I think I'm doing a better job than them. If I quit, then it's all for nothing. We do make mistakes. We learn a lot more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. But the reason I started learning was to help Dennis. I never envisaged that I would leave my full-time job and become self-employed being a dog trainer. I absolutely never envisaged that. If somebody had told me that in my 20s and 30s, I think you've got to be kidding me. And yet it was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah, it's interesting, that thing of looking back and feeling that guilt or regret. I think often we're acting with the best intentions with the information that we have at the time, but it can be hard to look back and realize those mistakes.
Yeah.
Is there advice you'd give to someone who is feeling that, whether they be a dog trainer or someone who's got a new dog and is thinking back to some of the things they used to do?
I think leave it in the past. What's done is done. And we learn from all of those things. I learned from going to the flyball thing. I learned from the dog training classes. Why would we even teach that? What on earth use is that? Listen to the dog. Some dogs really like the engagement of training and they want us to interact with them and do stuff, but it's recognizing when they like it and when they don't like it, and just learn from your mistakes. Don't give up. I do know a lot of people who've given up over the years. I felt like it sometimes. There is burnout that happens because it can be a really challenging career. It's learning from everything and bringing it into your work so that you make less mistakes, but also encouraging others. We all feel like giving up sometimes. I know because I've been doing it for a long time, people think, oh, it's okay, Winkie knows how to sort it all out. We all suffer from self-doubt and imposter syndrome and burnout, and it's helping each other. One thing that's always helped me is I do like networking with other people and helping other people and discussing and learning with others. And reach out to others. I know when I first started being a full-time dog trainer, I did reach out to some of the local dog trainers about getting together and stuff. Oh my God, you would have thought I'd said something really rude to them because they're like, what? And none of the dog trainers wanted to get together at that time. And it's still like that to a certain extent. I think everyone's jealously guards their secrets, where actually I think it's much nicer to share. If we share experiences and share our successes and things that work and things that don't, then we all learn and move forwards. And it should be like that. If you really love dogs and you want to change things for them, then working together makes a lot of sense, because there's a limited amount that you can do all on your own. In those difficult times, how nice is it? I mean, we do it all the time. We have a problem, but just to be able to talk to somebody else who gets it is vital. Not somebody who's trying to give you solutions for anything, but to just talk through it. It's listening and seeking help from each other without judgment.
It's so true. We put this, well, I know I do, as you know, you put this expectation on yourself to know everything and be able to solve every problem. Yeah. And I know there's discussion going on, which is great actually in the industry, about how that framework is not all that helpful. And also it's an impossible ask. So I think that acknowledgement that you don't always know everything and there are things that you need help with, or like you say, those moments where you just want to say, look, this is hard, the thing that I'm dealing with, regardless of how experienced you are or which courses you've done. I think we definitely all have those moments. I'm going to switch gear a little bit because I would love to talk about terriers, because I know you love them and they are characters. I would love you to share for people who are thinking of getting a terrier, what are some things that people need to understand about that particular category of dog?
The first thing is quit is not in their vocabulary. If you argue with them and you try and force them, they won't like you very much and then they won't listen to you. Their prey drive is incredibly strong. So he was a Parsons type terrier. He was 17 inches tall. I suspect he probably came from Ireland, and he was an adult when I got him. And he was phenomenally prey driven. I mean, he would have anything. Nothing was safe around him at all, especially in the early stages. He got better, but they will go down rabbit holes and they will actually stay down there or down a foxhole. And Dennis would go down a foxhole and you would just hear that the fox was home and not very happy. And you could hear the fight, but it was underground and there's nothing you could do about it. He'd go and sit down a rabbit hole and you couldn't see him, but you know he's down a hole somewhere. And he'd come out in his own time. They're not for the faint-hearted because they have been bred to be head of pest control. I never had problems with mice or rats at home. My neighbour had a problem with rats and told me, and the next thing there was a bit of a furore in the garden and Dennis caught a big fat rat in the garden. If a fox came in the garden or a cat, they probably wouldn't come back again because he was very determined. He would guard the home if somebody came in and he wasn't expecting them. They can be quite sharp. They're guarders. They guard you. So Dennis would guard me. There was a guy who on one of our local commons and he had a Labrador puppy and he was training it in the most awful way and he was shaking it, hitting it, and this poor little puppy looked so sad. And I did say to him, there's much ways to train your puppy. I can give you the details. There's some good books or some trainers. And he couldn't have been more rude. And so every time I saw this guy abusing his puppy, I'd see red and probably my body went all stiff. And Dennis picked up on that. And then every time we saw this guy, his hackles would go up and he'd start growling at this guy and his poor little sad puppy. I realised that actually, if I carried on, Dennis would probably go and have a go at one or both of them because that was his way of dealing with things. So I had to start to not be stressed, to change where I walked. So we didn't actually ever see this, which was a blessing. But whenever I got stressed, Dennis would become more protective of me. He taught me an awful lot about my own stress. And when I got stressed with pressure of work or life or whatever, he'd be like ready to pop at anybody who he thought was stressing me. It was a big life lesson for me to learn to chill out more and control my own stress and feelings, because Dennis would definitely pick up on it. Even with a friend who came to my home with a new boyfriend who I didn't really like very much. And he was trying to mess about with Dennis. He bit many friends' boyfriends because they just had to, mess about. And because I also was a bit irritated by the fact she brought him along, he bit him and he left. So that was good. But you have to really control your own feelings because they pick up on everything. They're super smart. Never force them. And they're quick to react. That's what we wanted them for. You don't want a terrier to go into a barn full of rats and kill one and then go lie down and have a sleep. We have taught them to be tenacious and to never quit. But they are fabulous. They are the most loyal and individual characters ever, and really resilient. Dennis would get into all sorts of scrapes, and he would wear his little war wounds with pride. He's like, hey, yeah, whatever. And he would go and try and take on really big dogs. I mean, in the early stages when he had quite bad into dog issues, the dog only need to look at him the wrong way and there would be no warning and he'd be off. And it could be a much bigger dog. And sometimes he did come off a little bit badly, but it never stopped him and nothing made him feel bad, really. He was just one of life's complete optimists. And it was all about him having fun and living his best life. I did try to teach him some of the things that I did take him to a dog show once. I took him to a terrier show and they touched them. So the judge was touching him because I thought he was so gorgeous, he'd obviously win. And the judge was touching him. And I said, I think you need to stop touching him now because I could see Dennis's lip curl. And you had to literally get your hands right away very quickly once he decided that he didn't like what you were doing. So we left the ring because that wasn't going to end well.
Probably best for everyone there, yeah.
I loved him for his forthrightness and his total honesty and how he felt about things. It was very obvious how he felt. And if you didn't listen quickly enough, then he would react. I see a lot of terriers and lurchers because obviously they're the breeds I live with and know quite well. I love independent thinkers. He was lovely with my nieces and godchildren. He had the lovely soft side to him. He'd sleep on my bed next to me and he'd be just heaven. He changed my life in another way, actually, because when I got him, I was in a relationship with somebody who thought he knew about dogs and things. And I just used to say to him, just don't mess with Dennis. Just don't try and play with him. Because if you tried to play with him, he'd work his hand up the toy and bite your hand. He quite like rough play. And it's just like, leave him alone. And then one day he said, I think you love your dog more than me. And I thought, you know what, you're absolutely right. So I called him a cab, gathered things that he'd left at my flat. And I said, thank you so much for bringing that to my attention.
What a lesson that Dennis taught you. That's very useful. Know. Sounds like he was a nonsense filter.
Yes, he was a nonsense filter. And even to the end, he lived with me 16 and a half years. He was 2 or 3 when I got him. And he was himself the whole way through his life. He was tenacious. He would go off exploring. He loved to swim. He continued to be a bit obsessive with things occasionally, and that was his coping strategy. So when he got overexcited, he would get stressed and then he'd need to lick something to calm himself down. But because of his terrier obsessive nature, he maybe did it a little bit more than other breeds might have done. God, he taught me a lot. And we had such lovely times, many happy memories.
You're never bored, I think, with the terrier. They just have so much character. Never bored. Yeah. And he in particular had a lot of character. Yeah.
Absolute bundles of it. He taught me about how to deal with postmen. He'd see the postman coming to the front door every day. I've just learned putting frosting up made a huge difference. So he couldn't actually see the postman coming, and making sure that we took the post in different ways so it didn't stress him out, because he started to see the postman on a walk and giving him the eye, which meant that we had to change what happened, because I know you keep coming to my house every day, I'm going to have you next time. He taught me to find more innovative, nice, easy ways to remove the possibility to practice unwanted behaviours. He just taught me to tell him not to do things was obviously never going to work. And we found other ways of dealing with things.
Thinking about all the lessons that Dennis taught you, is there a piece of advice or even a couple of things that for people listening you think really sums up what those lessons were or helps them to understand their relationship with their own dog?
I think it's about understanding each individual personality. They're all so individual, and you've got to understand each individual for who they truly are. And we need to listen and observe them and realise that they change as they get older. Their likes and dislikes change as well. I've learned a lot from other professionals. I've learned loads from lots of different sources, but I've learned the most from working with dogs. I live and work in London. I see a lot of dogs every year, probably over 1,000 dogs a year I work with. And the difficult dogs teach us way more than the easy dogs. The easy dogs make us feel really good because, it's a really easy fix. But embrace the difficult ones. The difficult ones will teach you so much more. Accept who they are. Don't try to force them to be something that they're not, because it won't work and they won't be happy.
And then neither will you be.
No, neither will be. And in really encourage free thinking. I love free thinking dogs who make their own decisions, but it is the relationship. The relationship that we have with our dogs is the most important thing. Whether they can do anything that we ask or whether they want to do anything we ask is a whole other matter. But the relationship with them, they spend 80 to 90% of the time in our home. That needs to be amazing. We need to have that lovely relationship and to go off on little adventures together. But make it fun, enjoy it, laugh with them. I swear dogs have a sense of humour and they like, haha, see what I'm doing. Can you see me? And they love it. Dennis used to love it when he was swimming. I'd walk along by a river and he'd be swimming down the middle of the river because he loved to swim. And he'd be looking at me and they love it when they're doing stuff. And we look and say, yay, that's really clever. Really see your dog and be aware of how they see you. And if I was my dog, how would I want to be treated? And I think we need to put ourselves in their paws sometimes.
I love that idea of embrace the difficult ones, because I'd have to say from all the conversations I've had for this podcast, no one's that dog has been, oh, they're really easy and we had no problems at all. That's just not a story, that people tell. If people want to learn more about you and your work, where can they find you?
They can find me on my website, which is winkiespiers.com. They can find me on Instagram. Facebook is a little bit tricky because I got hacked on Facebook and now I don't control either of the pages on there. So that's a bit of a pain. So yeah, those are the main ways.
Brilliant. We'll put all those links into the show notes if people want to get in touch or follow your Instagram, which has lots of lovely photos of your other beautiful dogs. Thank you so much for joining us and being part of the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the That Dog podcast, hosted and produced by me, Harriet Alexander of All Dogs Are Good. You can find out more about my work by visiting alldogsaregood.com. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favourite platform. And if you enjoyed the show and want to hear more, leave a review. It really does help the podcast. And now, it's time to go and learn from your dog.